I saw this moment for you a long time ago. I was never going to give up on it. This is what you're meant to do. You have an incredible gift. I think that's one thing that true friends can do for each other is they can hold the vision of what they know is possible.
Would I have discovered my capacity creatively as a writer, without my story being the story that it was? I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel, which is like, this is the way out. You write yourself out of this.
And then if you can say, I love my whole story, then nothing you've ever experienced is experienced as suffering, because it's experienced as the art of your story.
Putting this book together, it was about her too. It's about bringing that voice of that part of me at that time all the way to the finish line to be honored. And that was the poetry that was like alchemizing all of those moments into beauty. We're in a revolutionary moment where we are collectively rewriting or writing a new chapter. We can't totally rewrite the past, but we can make it a ridiculous masterpiece by allowing it to evolve instead of just being stuck in the tragic for, endless loops.
I'm sending the angels, the warriors, star kings. I'm waking the dragons, the merlins and fae to fight at your side, to kneel and be knighted, so you may rise, goddess, rise. I'm so sorry it's taken us this long.
Thank you.
My relationship with Caitlyn Howe started 2 decades ago, where we were star-struck lovers that ended up getting engaged, and then we split. And from there, we both went on our own wild adventures. But there was something we always had in common. We had a poet's soul, and we've become the absolute best friends in the time since. And through this whole journey, which has taken me through the ups and downs of polyamory and through Caitlyn's own dark night of the soul, we've shared our story through poetry that is now being published in a companion poetry collection, my book being Love to the Seventh Power, and Caitlyn's being Ridiculous Masterpiece, which absolutely correctly defines the beauty of her life. So in this podcast, we share poems, we share stories, and we share the inner vulnerable details of what the origin source of all of this poetry and all of our love that's expressed through our words, and our absolute delight to share these offerings with you and the rest of the world. So without further ado, Caitlyn Howe. Caitlyn Howe, poet queen. 15 years ago, you and I were engaged.
Yeah.
And we were in the wild throes of Eros, a full, romantic, sexual, outrageous love affair that was unbelievably passionate.
Truly epic.
And now, here we are, 15 years later, and we're in a wild, ecstatic throes of philia.
Philia, yes. The deepest
brotherly,
friendship.
The deepest friendship, like the deepest true love friendship.
Uh-huh.
And you've been there for me in some of my hardest moments, uniquely actually, because of different synchronous, serendipitous things that have happened where I really needed support after an incredibly hard night. And my partners were gone, and it was always you. Like 3 of the hardest nights of my life. You were there, and it's so really just beautiful. And also there's pain underneath the surface there as well. But the beauty overwhelms all of it, to see how we could transform from one type of love to another type of love. And the depth, none of it's been lost. It's just changed form. And so we're going to go deep into both of our poetry books, but this is one of the big themes of mine, which is all poetry comes from love, but there are 7 types of love.
Yes.
And Eros and Philia are 2 of those types, and we might touch on some of the other types. But I think it's just cool because we're actually in the full embodiment of love in its different prisms, like the 7 fractals of, the 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7 musical notes, the 7 different types of love. We're still playing the same loud song through the same loud speakers, just a different type of music. But it's still coming from love, and it's beautiful to be here in this process. And the reality is that there's nobody really in the world that knows each other as well as I know you and you know me. So we're going to take some time here to really talk and lead through, because both of us have chosen or been chosen to have poetry as our primary expression of art. And so we're going to go in deep and tell the tale of all of the love and pain and heartbreak and beauty that we've experienced here together.
Yeah. What a masterpiece it's been.
Yeah.
What a masterpiece. I'm really moved. I feel my heart just on fire with love and wonder in this moment, getting to sit here with you and talk about this. Like, what a ride. What a ride. I feel like I know you better than maybe most anybody on the face of the earth.
It's true.
And likewise. So yeah, it's really been, the honor and the blessing of my life to get to dance through so many different forms of love. We've served side by side in our Dharma together.
Yeah.
We've built our dreams side by side. Yeah. It's been just the most incredible blessing. I really feel like, we're each other's guardian angels in certain ways and best friends, and we've been everything in between. And so to get to sit in this seat, I've been on the podcast a few times, but to get to sit here today and talk about, I think the part of my life that's been the most meaningful, the most precious to me, and explore the way that weaves into our dance in true love. And all the forms that true love takes. It's just magical and amazing. So yeah, we have a lot of stories that we could go into today,
but and we might.
We'll see where the muse takes us.
Exactly. I saw this moment for you.
Yeah.
A long time ago. And I was never going to give up on it, because I saw like this is what you're meant to do. You have an incredible gift. And like this moment of you actually producing this book and, sharing your art and your heart with the world, the Caitlyn that I've seen and loved so much, to be able to share that love and that beauty in all of its forms with the world. Like, I've seen it all the way, and used to say that I was haunting you with that vision. I just wouldn't ever let it go. And I think that's one thing that true friends can do for each other, is they can hold the vision of what they know is possible.
Yeah. What they know is possible and what they know is true when we forget, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When did you forget? What were the times that you forgot?
Oh, man. Well, more specifically, aside from in certain ways, almost every day, I think when we dated, when we were together, I'm 41 now. So I met you when I was 23. And, it feels like lifetimes have passed since that lifetime. And it was such a special, legendary ride we got to take together as beloveds, and really, really formative for me. I think my perspective on the world was opened by you. I hadn't remembered enough at that point yet to forget, right? It was like I was just coming into a new level of consciousness and expanding my perspective and my sense of possibility within the world. I was a bartender, and I just had, I always had this depth and this sort of ambition for what was possible and in my life, but it was really limited by what I'd known. I hadn't seen much of the world. I hadn't really begun to take that seeker's journey into what is my path of purpose here? What am I meant to be doing to contribute to the great love story of the world and of humanity? And that wasn't even like in my lexicon at that point, It was just pure presence and experience. And through our relationship, I started to really discover my power. I think I started to really feel that within myself. It was in our relationship that I started to gently remember my passion for writing, which had existed since I was 5 years old. I used to make little books with, I have one called The Rainbow by Caitlyn, and it's all stick figures. It was called The Rainbow.
Of course.
And it was made with construction paper. And I guess I could say, if I tracked it back far enough, there was a formative or like developmental forgetting moment for me as a young woman, where I started to orient to the world of superficial, validation. And so it was like, before I even met you, I'd started to orient my attention into the world of feeling safe through beauty, through feeling validated through social feedback. And I had kind of lost my way with my passions for creativity because I was much more interested in the eros of experience. And
do you think that's a trap that, a beautiful woman can fall into? Because there's so much attention that you can get just from showing up and radiating, your beauty, which your beauty was always both external and internal, which made you so magnetic in a situation. I mean, it was your magnetism and I suppose my magnetism that drew us together when we saw each other across from a club one night and we started both singing the same Mickey Avalon song and we looked at each other and we're like, oh shit, both of us were in other relationships and we were like, ruh-roh.
Yeah.
I was like,
you got to be pretty cool to know the words to this song.
Yeah, like, do you want to have tea? And you're like, tea sounds good. And then I chased you down and invited you to multiple dates, which you refused multiple times.
I'm a wily one. It's hard to get me. It's hard to pin me down.
Totally. But I was persistent. I was persistent.
Thankfully.
Yeah. And then once it kicked off, there was just no stopping where I was. But to get back to the former point, I think when you're getting that much external validation and you're getting that much feedback, I think it might be easy to get lost.
Oh, totally.
In chasing that.
In a way, I was lost when I met you but I didn't realize it, of course. And it was like a discovery phase.
Sure, you're young.
Right? Really young, really starting to taste freedom out of high school and college. It's like, oh, I can, meet all these people and have adventures. And that was very alluring. But I think it is a trap for women to, find a groove in which your beauty creates security for you. And I think it's kind of the pseudo security. Once you have that attention, you have favor socially. And once you have social favor, you have more opportunity. And that's the subconscious kind of background interpretation of that feedback. It's like deep down, I knew I had a lot more substance and value than, just being the beautiful, well-received, popular young woman. But I knew that favor was security and that if I could have attention, then somebody might notice my depth and might notice my value and might, help me find those opportunities that didn't come easy to me because I grew up, my family didn't have a lot of resources. We had 5 children. It was always it felt like a gateway into more life and more experience and more opportunity. And then when I met you, you really saw me. It was like you were already a poet. I think one of the first things you did for me as a romantic gesture once I finally, let my armor down a little bit and let you in was you wrote me a poem. And that was, I think the first time a man had written me a poem.
Was that the poem about the pearl?
That one came later. This one was about, it was like a remix of Leia Lesbia. Let us live and let us love. And I think I have a copy of it somewhere, like stained and in the old archives of the analog world where we used to print things for each other instead of sending them in text messages and emails.
And that was an old Catullus poem. So I studied, I was a classics major and I'd studied also classics philosophy double major, but I'd really gone into the poems of Catullus and the poems of Ovid and the different, Roman poets. And Catullus had this, and now thinking about it, I haven't thought about that in a long time, but really it made a deep imprint because he was madly in love with, his muse, who we called Lesbia, who was from the island of Lesbos and was also, this kind of bisexual wild muse. and ultimately, his poems of wild, wild love, and what one of the words would be in the Greek lexicon.
Lesbia, my lesbia.
Is mania. It's this obsessive love. And so
yeah.
it's this mania, and it was eros, and it was all of this kind of passion.
Like a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Lovers.
I mean, mania it has a really bad connotation, and it can be incredibly toxic.
Oh, yeah.
However, it's one hell of a ride, like you're just consumed with passion, and from those places of passion, there's so much poetry that comes out. Like in my book, when you go into the mania section, like hold on to your seat, because it's like, it's wild, it goes into the real depths of it. But I think Catullus was the one who kind of imprinted in my mind, like, oh, he's doing this as a part of self-therapy, also as a part of a way to impress, his muse, but also a way for him to actually get his truth out in a way that is another one of the words for love is philautia, which is self-love. So the act of writing his mania into poetry was actually an act of philautia for himself, so that he could alchemize and actually express those feelings that were so deep.
Yeah, it's really remarkable to track. That for me, I constantly say, I'm a lady of passion. I believe passion is to love what you feel, and to love what you feel when you're angry, and to love what you feel when you're longing, and to love what you feel when you're crying and weeping and grieving. And it doesn't mean that you enjoy it or that you desire the painful parts, but it means that love is present. Like you're experiencing your own love, really is what it is. And I think when we write, even if our, star-crossed lover never gets to read the piece, which I think a lot of poets throughout history, it's like, writing to the muse is always the face of what has awakened your highest capacity for love. It's awakened your passion. So it might be awakening your passion for your fury or your activism or cause, or it might be awakening your passion for, the capacity to which you can love and be obsessed with somebody, and just to get to experience that in yourself. It's taking you to the spectrum of what's possible within your range of love. And so there's been a lot of faces of my passion, I think, and over time learning, like, oh, that was my love always. It was like this man in this new chapter became the face of me getting to experience my love. And I think that philautia, that self-experiencing of the self and loving of the experience of love through the self, it's very subconscious. Like, you don't really notice that it's like, oh, I'm loving myself while I love this hard, but we are. And there's often, I think, many different kinds of, many different kinds of love alive in the experience of love. We think it has like one, it must mean this one thing, and it must be about this one person. And it's really about many different kinds of love.
And also sometimes you're abandoning yourself.
Totally.
Right? You're abandoning yourself and not loving yourself. And then, but the moment you put pen to paper and you write about your self-abandonment, you alchemize your self-abandonment into a practice of self-love. Right? It's just about recognizing and expressing those moments. And, I have poems in my book about those moments of self-abandonment. One's called Hedonic Aftermath. We have, and that's a part of this. But what I really love about your book, which is perfectly titled, Ridiculous Masterpiece, Drama Poetica, is you're loving your whole story.
That's what it's about.
You're loving your whole story like a poet would, because you've really felt, you've really lived, you've really loved. And then if you can say, I love my whole story, then nothing you've ever experienced is experienced as suffering, because it's experienced as the art of your story. And any great story has deep challenges and deep heartbreaks and deep pain. Like, what movie have we seen where everything starts out good and it stays good the whole way. We may want it to. We may like, this is awesome. Like, but then of course something happens and then the hero has to transform and make it through the other side, you know?
Yeah.
Like William Wallace wouldn't have been Braveheart if his beloved Murren hadn't been slain.
Exactly.
So did he want Murren to be slain? No. Did he ever wish that it would have been different? No. But also he got to be one of the formative myths that we can live our life by because of the pain and how he transformed that story. Now his story is a story of a warrior. But there's many, many other different stories, but it all includes the struggle and the pain and all the struggle and all of that suffering. It ends the moment gratitude begins.
Absolutely. And I think it's that very struggle that we, rage against and, wish we could avoid that creates any modicum of victory. Like you can't experience victory unless there's a struggle. It wouldn't be even a felt experience for a human being if we didn't have that struggle. And I think, to go back to our love story, the big forgetting moment for me was actually when we split up, and there was such a big part of me that raged at that ending for us, which of course it didn't turn out to be the end. But in that moment, that was all I could experience. It was like, this can't be the end of our story. It's been so beautiful. It's been, a real fairy tale for me. It was like, and I know for you too. It was a very, I really say it with no hyperbole. It was a legendary love story, and it was a legendary experience of love. And in that moment, and I've had a couple of big life-altering heartbreaks in my life, a few of them, including the death of my father and other types of heartbreak. But in that moment, I couldn't make sense of or accept the ending that it seemed like we had. And what ended up happening is it was our separation that drove me deeper into myself and into, I've talked about it a couple of times in past shows, but into the underworld. So the first chapter of my book in this book, Ridiculous Masterpiece, is called Underworld Heart. And it's like going back to really excavate and examine and carry forward all the pieces that started to come through for me as a poet from when I was in, the deepest throes of my shadow, because I was really resisting what was happening. And it was poetry and it was writing that brought me out of the underworld. It was poetry and writing that helped me start to make sense of some of the greatest pain that I'd ever experienced. And I'm pretty confident we can't imagine a different way other than what was. But I can't imagine that there wasn't a divine design to the ending of our relationship to catalyze that self-discovery through the underworld in my life, because I was really comfortable with you. We were just getting along great and, having a blast most of the time. It started to taper off there at the end, but
actually it didn't really. We were still quite passionate all the way through the end. It was just there was some fundamental misalignment that
I think we both had to.
We both had to go on our own adventure.
And it was really like, would I have discovered my capacity creatively as a writer, without my story being the story that it was? And it took me a couple years to start seeing this. And this was the first point. I remember getting really after we split, there was new loves, and they were much, much harder, much more difficult, much more painful, and a lot of personal experiences that really drove me into a place of forgetting my value and losing touch with my worth and questioning, completely losing sight of my path and my Dharma. And it wasn't until I started to write through it that I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel, which is like, this is the way out. You write yourself out of this, and you write the truth.
The truth.
You tell your story, telling your true story, and not, beautifying it or editing it or polishing it for anybody is the way out. And it was, I still remember I was working in I was at this point working at a casino called the SLS, which I don't even know if it's still open, in Las Vegas. And I remember speaking with you on the phone and saying, I want to write a book. And it was like the first time I felt the spark, and you felt it with me. And you were like, Caitlyn, you got to get out of there. It's just another shiny room in hell. And I was like, that's the title of the book. And I left Vegas and I went and lived in my sister's. And I said thank you to you. And you said, I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to haunt you till the day you die. And it was a haunting of, I know who you are. You've forgotten. Go remember. And I'll be here to continue to remind you who the fuck you are, which is somebody of great worth and great purpose. And as I drove back, I remember driving through the desert with my car full of stuff back to my home after running away for 2 years and living in my sister's guest house that winter. And I read all the books, Joyce Carol Oates and Stephen King. And I started to teach myself again what I abandoned in my pursuit of that false light of security through my appearance and social situations and addictions and things that were keeping me in a false sense of security that wasn't actually rooted in what I loved and what mattered to me and in my own substance. And I wrote my first draft of my first book. And then I started really writing poetry. And that was the poetry that was like alchemizing all of those moments into beauty. So everything that was ugly, this is actually like a thing. I have a thing with almost, I've been, when I look at my poetry, it's very personal. It's very much about making beautiful what seems ugly on the surface and revealing the beauty and revealing through the writing process, revealing to myself what's beautiful here, what's true here, like where's the value in this dark and murky moment. And as I discover it through the poem or create it through the poem, I think it's actually also creating it through the poem, it redeems everything. And so that became the way I kind of pulled myself out and then onto what would become my spiritual path and my path of purpose and true purpose. And the dream of that book, that first book, has been alive ever since. And now, so many years later, it's come to fruition.
What's interesting is you publishing this poetry book gives you an ending to your memoir, A Shiny Room in Hell.
Yes.
And that's what it needed. It needed an ending. So let's go. I want to go through and take us to a place in your book that has a poem that expresses the underworld, the depth of the underworld, and in a place that you were in, when it was dark.
Well, the opening poem for my book, the prologue that opens at King Persephone, is quite an all-encompassing poem. It's the way that I begin the book, but it kind of covers the journey. I really love that one. I have a section in the book called Carnival, and Carnival is really about the exiles, I think.
And is that from parts theory, like the exiles of yourself? Yeah.
Yes. So Carnival means flesh, farewell to the flesh. So all the parts that the veil is the cleaving away of the carn, the meat. So parts of me that I had carved away and pretended weren't real, weren't true, weren't me, And really that one really covers a lot of emotion too. I think there was pieces of my emotional capacity that felt like too much. I hear this from a lot of women. It's like the feeling of I'm too much, so I'm going to hide that part. I don't want to show everybody my fury, my longing, my jealousy, my mania. Maybe I could pull it up for a second and see if I can feel the perfect one. All right, I have two that are written from at that time, actually, which I think would be probably capture it pretty well. This is straight from the belly of the beast.
Let's go.
All right. The first one is Cell. I curse the jailer. 2 cold boots move like the hands of a clock that Father Time mocks because time doesn't matter here. Fear is an old memory, dead and cobwebbed with the staleness of reality. Nothing left to anticipate, to wait for, or even dread, except that hope might die altogether. The hope that he might pardon me, set me free, and let me be who I once had been. Condemned instead to a steel bar fate, a locked gate, and the sensation of starvation from within. Oh, how I craved the sunlit salt of sin, the rim of a cold glass of wet-mouthed libation, the titillation of an unimaginable future. The keyhole is collapsing in my eye, once expanding in cosmic infinitudes of multiverses with countless stars. Proof that I was born to create like God, not to die slow like the flickering light of my cell. But just before the light goes out, I see that my cells are the jail and my thoughts are the key. So who tricked me to think I'm not already free?
Ooh-wee. That was the one.
That was the one. That was the one.
Wow. That's an incredible poem.
Thank you. I really, there's a few in the first chapter in this book that I wrote in real time back then. And as I, improved and grew in my consciousness and in my heart, there's a part of me that was like, that didn't want to own those poems. It was like, those weren't good enough, And putting this book together, it was about her too. It's about bringing that voice of that part of me at that time all the way to the finish line to be honored. So
I hope you guys are enjoying this podcast with myself and Caitlyn Howe. We just want to make you aware that our books are available right now for sale at chakaruna.com. We have signed copies. We have these golden bookmarks from Metal Mark, which is 100 milligrams of fully assayable and recoverable gold, whose value, who knows where it'll go in the future. But ultimately, we have beautiful books, signed copies in these golden bookmarks. If you go to chakaruna.com, chakaruna.com, you can check it out. We love you, and I hope you guys love our books too. That's the thing about poetry is, and I think it's one of the reasons that it's fallen out of favor, is it's really just about the rawest expression of truth. And all of the tricks, the rhymes, the different things, all of that's cool. But if it gets in the way of the rawness of the truth, it's not the best poem that you can write.
Right.
And I think you see that with poets is, oftentimes the way the cleverness of the words you use, the metaphors, all of that's important. It's all part of the art. But the real thing is like, is it true? Is it honest?
Yeah.
Was this an honest expression of what I was feeling? And I've always said that the words are not the craft of the poet, they're the obstacle. Right? They get in the way of what we're really trying to say. And so we put them together in a way that they don't mask the truth of what we're actually feeling, that we allow a clear window into the raw emotion and passion of what we were feeling.
Wow. That's it. That's it. There's so much of that for me in this book and in my process too. It's like, to me personally, I believe with poetry is there's something that sings to the heart about just being able to relate to the raw truth of a feeling without having to necessarily deliver the reader to a higher perspective or to something that makes perfect sense or explains itself. I think we lose a lot of the purity and power of poetry when we try to, when we have the strategy of trying to get away from the raw feeling and arrive into, some idea of what a higher perspective or, an explanation or meaning would be for it. And for me, I've always really resonated with the poets who kind of tell it like it is, and I get to go deep into the cut of the heart that they're experiencing in the moment that they write that poem, because it relieves me for all the times when life didn't make sense to me and when life just cut and it just hurt and it was just confusing. And there's some kind of relief in that is so healing that it then opens the heart and it brings in that community through the poetry that's like, okay, I'm not alone and I'm not broken. And this is part of the human experience. And maybe if they could write about this, then I can love my experience too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. And I think it is, we do want to see a hero's journey.
Totally.
And I think, we recently looked at a poetry book together, and just by scanning it, I could read that she hadn't quite made it out the other side, but it was beautiful that she wrote from the place she was at. But it was like, okay, like you gotta make it through. You gotta make it through, like some way. And that's, I think, the beauty of the Ridiculous Masterpiece is it's, and we're going to stay here in the underworld, and we're going to watch the emergence, as it happens in its different forms. So do you want to share another poem from the underworld, or do you want to kind of start to move on into some other areas?
Yeah. I think, let me see here. So we can rise a level. Still in the underworld a little bit, but we're rising. We're now in the Carnival. Mm-hmm. So I'll share a piece from this because I think that this really encapsulates some of the energy of my rising and my reclamation. So there's a part of this book for me that is actually, stitching back together the fullness of who I was and who I always have been, who I am in truth. By excavating, honoring, and giving a voice to all of these parts of me that were the ones, hiding or crying in the shadows, and me kind of ignoring them and cleaving them away. It was, an opportunity for me to give them a voice so they could come home. Mm-hmm. And every time I did that, I reclaimed a little bit more of my power, and it gets to sit in, a healthy and beautiful way inside my body. So, this one's spicy. But I think
it's spicy.
I do.
Like
I
a
love
marg.
It spicy. I love a spicy marg. I love a spicy poem.
And if you don't like it spicy, you're probably not going to like our books.
Right.
Because our truth is spicy.
Our truth is spicy. You could skip ahead to the very end of the book. You might find some stuff you love, but solid, spicy majority in here. So this is from Stage 3, Bloodlines. Dismembered. Someone lied to me once, in an echo of the narrative that our generation was born to live. And I began a life on stage. I was given lines for stories about wrinkles and old age, and beautiful princesses and ugly stepsisters, and invisibility and worth. Year by year, I forgot the earth and became obsessed with just one piece of her, my body. I stole it from natural ecology and sculpted the figure I thought it should be. Shame became an X-Acto knife to fit my landscape inside a paper doll frame. Limb by limb, I cut off all my hair, took parts of other women, put them here and there. If they think you're beautiful, you're safe. That turned out to be a lie too. Because nothing is safe in a story that's not true. Is it any wonder how Pinocchio's nose grows like a dick? I don't believe in coincidences. I want my power back. Take the duct tape off my mouth. I thought it was hot, but I am lifting the blindfold now, and I want you to look me in the eyes as I forgive the world through you. And I do take responsibility to the degree that I agreed to do as I was told or thought I should. My blood-soaked hands were ripped from the loom of magic weaving and forced into servitude as my own hitmen. And I want to mend what I had them do. I repent to the totality of me. If lies are the acts of dismemberment, then truth is the red thread that will stitch me back together. But it's not enough to be a rag doll. Let the sutures become veins by the power of my loving will. If I could fabricate real life, I can unravel the illusion. All I have is this spool of yarn, my word. And I still have the earth. I am the earth. That is all I need to remember.
You're on the way up.
You're
on the way up here. You're on
She's
the way
angry,
up. Yeah, you're on
but
the way up.
she's restoring.
You know, it's interesting because you've gone through the journey of used to have big old fake breasts, and they were, impeccably done, I have to say. But fundamentally, they weren't really you, right? There was something else. And I actually have a poem about that. And
fire poem.
Yeah, so I might jump into that because what you're talking about here also are these stories that we're told, stories about beauty and stories about what we need to do to modify ourselves to actually be something that we're not. And for me, I've always looked at that and been like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like you're so beautiful. Like
So
you don't
true.
need decorate the costume, get a tattoo or put on your makeup, whatever. All that's cool. It's like decorations, it's like cool clothes, like of course, or a great haircut, like awesome. But like these fundamental changes to who you are is something I've always, been kind of I don't know. It just hasn't felt right to me. And it hasn't felt like this is making anybody more beautiful when they're doing these things. And it wasn't that I didn't think you were incredibly beautiful back then, of course, but it was more in spite of what you had done than actually
you were
because
always
of what
an
you had done.
advocate for the natural beauty, always. And I really, I already had my implants at that time when we got together. And I can really look back on it and say, I really took them in as my own. I had sort of an instantaneous, once I got them done, I had a lot of scars on my legs. I'd been through a really bad car accident and I was very hyper self-conscious about these, so this poem has a lot of meaning to me also about remembering and restitching all the wounded pieces of self. There's a spicy take on kind of like the story that the world gave us, which is true to a degree. And we agreed to it. We've lost touch with that part that has that deeply rooted self-love. And I think together as a collective right now, we are reviving the stories of truth about the beauty of the feminine and where that value really comes from. For me, being a young teenager in the 90s and like early 2000s, when it's like the Britney Spears era, there wasn't a good, collective story of value that I could grasp onto, that I could see, that I knew about, about what the true value of being in the feminine was, And then, there's interfacing with all the relationships that, I was out in Las Vegas. It's a game out there. It's like, however more you're living in that story of the, pseudo-erotic kind of caricature of feminine beauty that we have seen happen in our lifetime, through the possibility for plastic surgery and the ways that the image of the feminine is now able to be spread globally. Before this time that we're in, everybody was in their respective tribes, and there was like paintings and like maybe newspaper photos, and there was a much more also a paradigm of covering the feminine and having this very proper, and then there was this almost explosive reactive counterswing in the pendulum of hypersexuality and caricaturizing that new idea of the liberated beauty that was super sexual and super inflated. And now we're finding like a central groove that isn't really about the body and the appearance at all. It's about the inner wonders of the body. It's about the heart. It's about the Dharma. It's about the power to create life. And we're all learning this and remembering this together. So that was, this past few years, it's been a lot of that reclamation for me, and removing my implants, rediscovering my center of my worth in my heart and in my work, and my creative power, which I think is the seed of the feminine.
And I'm gonna read my poem Explanting the Enchantment of Augmentation, and also just want to say that we were just recently in Miami for Art Basel, and you removed your implants, and there was probably some thought in your mind, oh, I'm not going to be as attractive anymore.
Totally.
And we were out at the dopest restaurant, this place called Queen, and then you just created the same scene that you've always created, all in the same way, had all of the most dapper, flyest, coolest gentlemen being like, oh, hey, it never came from there. It was never that to begin with. And that was like really cool to see you, and also see you seeing that with age and time and the removal of your implants, like you haven't lost a thing.
Thank you for that reflection.
I mean, it's just facts.
I'm rediscovering that.
It's just facts. 17
years of having that modification in my body. And it's like, I forgot, like, oh, this is coming straight from my soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm so excited for this poem. It's one of my favorites of yours of all time.
All right. Let's Explanting the Enchantment of Augmentation. Breasts are not sexual. They are erotic. They are not part of the apparatus of intercourse. They are the teat of source. The arousal we feel when nipples erect is our own divinity seeking to slake the thirst for God. To the queens, abide in your sovereignty. Feel free to discard this one poet's plea and do exactly as you please. But if I may be so bold, pause the scalpel. Steel yourself against the cleaving of attention observed in mom-starved boys in the presence of fecund cleavage. For those who can see, augmentation is commodification, the defacing of your majesty, turning unique mammary into a copy, turning the originality of your humanity into a silicone edifice, twin towers of imitation instead of Inanna's gift of life-giving mana.
Thank you. On behalf of women everywhere, really, really, really one of the most important messages. And I think it hits different coming from a man. I think we can't discount how much we actually need to hear men who have a seat of influence be the voice for that in the face of everything we've learned and been told. It's so, so powerful.
Yeah. And it's true. And this, this appears in the section Philia. This is really me loving on the sisters that I know and that I don't know, to say like, listen, like this is me. And you may not like a man like me, and that's all good. And if you do, and if you do want to be with someone who's really sees your unique essence, this thing that you did is actually not going to be something that's going to attract them. It's going to be something that they may love you in spite of, but that's just, this is a perspective. And I always think, like, in a way, we're presenting ourselves, whether we might say, like, I just dress how I want for me, but yes, and we're always looking to be attractive to the opposite sex in some way. It's so deeply encoded, and it's beautiful, it's natural. And then just to understand that actually, what are you, which type of man are you attracting? What are you looking for? It's like if you're going fishing, what's your lure? If that's your lure, then what is the fish you're going to catch?
Right.
And just to really think about that, like, do you really want to be seen for who you are at the deepest level? Well, then don't use something that's not you to catch somebody, because they're probably not going to be the one who's going to see you at that deepest level.
Right.
So it's like being aware of, like, all right, sure, you can project an avatar. Maybe it's a personality affect, or maybe it's a body affect. But if you really want to feel the love, like, of your unique self, which is the most outrageous and beautiful feeling we can experience, then that lure is actually not going to help you. It's going to actually be something that's resisting, and
100%.
So that's, I think, I was really happy to share that. And also, it's bold. It's like, I don't want anybody to say, like, I'm telling you what to do what you want. And that's what I said, do exactly as you please. Like, if you want to, go for it, but just offering, like, gently, like, a little perspective for me. And hopefully that, if someone's reading that, and a lot of times, I've shared that poem with people, and they've gone right ahead and done it anyways. Sure. And I love them still, and it's all sure. Good. But I just felt like it was important to just share that from my own heart to see if it has any impact.
Yeah, it is important, I will say. And your poetry has a beautiful blend of the deeply personal revelation of the Aubrey Marcus behind, the Aubrey that everyone has been able to have access to all these years, which you've always worn your heart on your sleeve, and you've always been super authentic, but it's just so intimate. And then there's also a lot of pieces, I think, that, distinguish between our books. Both of our books are the poet lovers writing their love songs to the universe in so many ways. So mine tells a bit more of, like, I think, a distinctive story for me personally, but yours also has a lot of revolutionary pieces for the times that I think are you trusting that truth within yourself to be a voice for something that is needed right now. Mm-hmm. That's very valuable for the collective awakening. And I think that that's something I get into in a little bit of ways at the end of the book through my lens. But we are we're in a revolutionary moment where we are collectively rewriting or writing a new chapter, actually. Mm-hmm. We can't totally rewrite the past, but we can make it a ridiculous masterpiece by allowing it to evolve instead of just being stuck in the tragic for, endless loops, right? And this piece is one of those where it wasn't, you didn't need to write it. You didn't have, it's not like Aubrey's catharsis, but it's Aubrey's truth that actually helps the moment.
And it's my philia, and there's storge, which is parental love. And this is to the love that I have as the love of, even though I'm not a biological father, I feel the energy of the father moving in. And so there's poems that are from the perspective of the father. That's also the beauty of poetry, is you get to write from different perspectives. So I have poems written from a woman's perspective, and I have poems written from a father's perspective, or doing my best to channel the father's perspective. And then I have poems of my own warrior heart saying and standing for what I believe agape, universal love, my love for culture and the world itself. And I think that's been a great way for me to organize my poems. But, the thesis of my book, all poetry comes from love. Every one of these poems in some way came from love, even if it's sharp and direct. And it's a big part of that is, like, it's because I love people and I love myself and I love the world and I love my lovers and I just love. And so, this poem, comes from love. And sometimes it's to my sister, and then sometimes it's to my daughter, sometimes it's to my son, even though I don't have a daughter and son yet, sometimes it's to the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read one more poem, and then I want to get back to your story here as well. But I want to read a poem, since I talked about, reading something from the perspective of the father. Mm-hmm. There's a really powerful poem called Apologies from the Father. And so again, Storge is parental love. Apologies from the Father. My magical daughter, not long ago my lost sons came for the priestesses with ropes and torch fire, lighting with shadow the unholy pyre after they redacted the feminine from the origin story. I'm so sorry. My beautiful daughter, even now you are trafficked, commodified and tricked, raped and cajoled. While predators are paroled, what they have stolen can never be returned. Once more, you are burned. I'm so sorry. My beloved daughter, I weep for you. With the identical tears I wept for my son, when his blood-wet streams flowed down empire's crossed beams. There is no measure in heaven for our cosmic loss. Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry. My powerful daughter, I'm sending the angels, the warriors, and star kings. I'm waking the dragons, the merlins, and fae to fight at your side, to kneel and be knighted, so you may rise, goddess, rise. I'm so sorry. It's taken us this long.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving a voice. Wow.
And this is, these poems for me, it's like they'll come with just a thread, and it feels like there's a balloon that's coming, stretching down from heaven, and it has a string. And as soon as I can grab the string, I can pull through the whole poem. And it's like I have a feeling, and I just have this feeling like fuck, like looking from the perspective of the Father, and tapping into that, not saying that I am, but just saying like, let me look through the Father's eyes. And when I look through the Father's eyes, what do I feel? And in expressing that through. And so that's, allowed me to have really one of the most beautiful sections, I think, in this book is Storge, which is me adopting the perspective of the mother, the perspective of the father, and really looking at the world through those lenses. I actually had you read one of the poems that was from the perspective of the mother. And of course, it's in this book, and in the audiobook, I read it. But it's, from the perspective of the mother.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of poetry, is you can adopt these different perspectives. So, I think, and it's also, a subtle distinction, I think, between your poems and my poems is I think your poems are largely from your perspective more than, but the personal, the personal, as you go deep in the personal, it explores the universal.
Exactly.
And so some of my poems are deeply, deeply personal, especially like in the mania section. It's all about my mania. Let's not get this twisted here, when I'm talking about, the challenges I had in polyamory and all of the different struggles with jealousy and all of that I felt. But even in Eros, there's a poem, a dakini to a warrior, that's written from the feminine perspective. And so it's been really beautiful for me as an artist to be able to adopt these different perspectives,
Totally.
And it's like a great, writer, male or female, that writes a male character from that perspective. It's just like you just step in and share it.
Totally. You have a really special capacity for that, I think. To me, the archetype of the poet, the lover in each of us, there's when we write poetry, there is a capacity that we're tapping into that I believe most human beings, like in our pure form, have. Whether or not that's developed or cultivated or nurtured throughout our lifetime is a different story. But it's the capacity to be very present and listen through the compassion of the heart. So while you may never have been a dakini to a warrior, you've been the warrior receiving the love and the healing of the feminine. And if you're listening, as the poet, you're listening and you're connected. You're actually at one with that stream of love that comes through every time, a woman has laid a gentle hand on your heart, and all the memory of humanity pumping through your veins with the memory of every time a woman has brought forth her erotic power to in the healing presence of her love to the weary heart of a man who's been to war. And your blood knows that story. And our blood knows all the stories of humanity. And so as poets, we slow down enough, we connect to that story, and then we see it, and we can be, another one of those threads, that channel that comes through. I've been, I think my ongoing battle as a poet is to really honor the moment that the thread comes in. Sometimes I'll be like blow drying my hair, and I'll have it feels like a higher inception of an idea, one line, one arrangement of words that comes in, and it's like, oh, if I pull this, there's something deeper here that I can't even see yet. It's not even my intention.
Totally.
And what I get tangled up in still, is putting that first, I think. It's a noisy time right now. There's lots of stimulation and there's lots of ambition and comparison and drive and all the things we should do and our to-do lists. And, for me, the midpoint of my book is called, I have my book sectioned into 3 acts. So the first act is red, the second act is thread, and the third act is masterpiece. And the second act is all about the shift out of the just kind of bleeding experience of my personal heartbreaks and passions and my parts and all of these things into the sort of the grounded, humbling moment of when my father died, and I really started to let go of some of the drama and start to confront my own calling to be a writer and to be a poet, and all of the kind of the inner creative battle around that. Was it good enough? Was this worth sharing? Was this worth creating? And because I think we can look at what's happening in the world, and there's always something, devastating if we look for it. There's always someone with a harder battle. There's always going to be a better poet. There's always going to be a more, experienced creator or a more successful creator. And when we start to look at that lens and compare, it can get really easy to discard those moments of inspiration where it's like something's coming through you and it's like, oh, not yet, that's not important enough. Or I wrote this thing, but it's not good enough and I'm not going to share it, and all of these pieces. But if we're really paying attention to poetry, even when it's about your personal story, and it's deeply intimate, it's deeply personal, it seems like it's, not super consequential for the collective. Within every one of those true stories of experience, there's a common thread that actually weaves into the story of every human being who's ever lived. And it might have a different shape, or it might have a different, different characters. But I think that feeling that comes through when we find a poem we can relate to, and it's medicine. We can never underestimate how much it's helping other people really reclaim the value of their own stories. So that's how the art kind of shifts out of the almost like the outrageous drama of the first couple of sections of the book. And I still, try to remind myself, and anybody who wants to develop more as a poet, is to really honor the moments where you're blessed by the muse with a thread. Because if you say like, oh, good idea, I'm going to go back and write that one later, it's like, maybe, but the channel's open right now. And that is coming through you right now. So how much can you give yourself over to trusting that it has value and it's coming through for a reason, and to just set everything aside and let it be born, So that was really like, really part of what carried me into the later chapters of my book, which get into more of that bigger picture of life as the masterpiece.
Take us there.
Okay. All right. So back into the flow of the ridiculous masterpiece. It was, I think, coming back here to Texas and really beginning to explore higher truths from that perspective, of my, I guess, from my writer's purview, really stepping into my path as a writer and starting to write poetry alongside a lot of the inner work and healing work I did within myself, really helped me start to get a different perspective outside of the feeling that I was, just being completely identified with my personal dramas. And I still use the poetry when the personal dramas come up. No doubt. They still come up, for me regularly, and I catch it and I try to, get back into the seat of the poet. Like, how can I love this? How can I make something beautiful with this? But it was really around, I guess, between 2019 and 2021, 2022, where I started, my father passed away. I started seeing life from a different angle than where I'd been able to see it before. And going deeper into my devotion, with a lot of things we did together. We were, side by side for so many different ceremonies with the plants, and with some of our teachers that, you guided me to always. My constant sacred guardian. I used to joke with me that God stalks me like nobody else. But it's really been quite extraordinary in my life how much I've gone into those moments of forgetting and darkness and the underworld and all of the distortions, and then been able to be pulled out of it by a moment so divine that it was like, oh yeah, I remember that there's higher design here. And this isn't all happening to me all the time. It's happening for me. And this is my quest. And this is my heroine's journey, really. And my unique heroine's journey, took me into a lot of relationship pain, and a lot of addiction pain, and a lot of some of the, areas of life that I think a lot of other people who've gone to some of the spiritual places that I've been with the medicines and with teachers, maybe they haven't seen the same underworld rooms that I've been in, but some have. So I started noticing I remember, I think it was 2022, I was in devotion with the dawn, and I'd had this magnificent, incredibly healing experience in Costa Rica with ayahuasca, with you and a bunch of the other.
Was that most magnificent dawn that has ever existed? Yes. It was so, we're coming out of an ayahuasca journey, And, the medicine had mostly worn off, but we're still in the vapors of, grandmother's lap.
Mm-hmm.
And just the birds were just singing in ecstasy, and the sun was rising over the ocean. And it was just like, oh my God, this is like Aurora, the goddess. Holy shit.
Yes. Yes. It was that night. It was so stupendous. It was my 19th ceremony over the span of 6 years at that point. And it was just a cosmic giggle because I really felt like I've been here and done this. I've done ayahuasca a lot. I've had these like really peak experiences. And that night I was taken into a really deep process of reclaiming all of myself. It was like, hey, I am Caitlyn Howe. Like my name matters and my path matters and my story matters. And I could see a perspective on my life that I'd never seen before. One where I really loved it all. I really loved every step. And I was grateful for every blistering, painful, burning moment because it had delivered me to this perspective. I couldn't have gotten that any other way than without, going through every one of those steps. And I remember that morning as the sun was rising and I was having my moment with the toilet, which I talked about at Arcadia, where I started to see life and the world as this living field of intelligence, divine intelligence that was actually trying to have a conversation with me and with you, with everybody else. And we're like in our own little narrow tunnels of personal drama. It's like, oh, I see it. There's a divine presence in everything here. And it's trying to court me. It's trying to bring me into intimacy with it. And that morning I could see it. And I remember the sun rising and I was downstairs below you and we were just out on the balcony, everybody like, oh my God. And it was in that space where I could really feel, I remember the birds, like it sounded like they were architecting the rising of the curtain of the day. It was like this sonar communication across the mountains, and the colors were magnificent, and it was so beautiful, and it was such a divine gift. I made a commitment that I was going to sit with the dawn every day for 40 days as like my thank you, my reciprocity. I'm not going to miss it. And it was during that time where we went out to Sedona for Violana's birthday, and the phrase ridiculous masterpiece came through. I was with you in the kitchen and we were laughing at like just the absurdity of the beauty of the way everything wove together. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's a ridiculous masterpiece. We were like, yes. And it just started to become the frame through which I could see the world. And it was during that period of my devotion, I fell very in love with life itself. And from that perspective, I remember really reflecting on my life and and the story of life, and having some deep insights as I was in my devotion that year about the nature of the story of life being, if God was a writer, would God write a bunch of smooth, easy, flowing daily activities where nothing goes wrong and there's no surprises, and the one that you want is the one that you get, and it's not shocking at all? It was like, that wouldn't be a very good story. And it was like, well, if I'm a writer, what kind of story would I write for my life? Oh, I would have written exactly the story that I lived. I would have written the story where I thought me and Aubrey were going to be together, but then it didn't turn out that way. And then I thought it was going to be this man. It didn't turn out that way. And then, this new challenge came in, and this was my new obstacle. And I was brave Caitlyn, showing up to life, going through every moment, not knowing what to expect and struggling through it and earning her victory and her depth and her wisdom through all of those challenges. I would have wrote the story I lived. And that was like, I think the moment where everything changed for me in my path. And I got enough self-love through that perspective to actually, make new choices for myself and start to live through the eyes of love instead of the eyes of Why me and self-destruction and self-doubt and all of those things that had kind of, clouded me for so many years. So that's what delivers me through the middle section of the book is my devotion with Aurora, the dawn, falling in love with life through the unveiling of the world in clarity. And then the second or the last act of the book is all love poems to life, to the goddess. It's just me loving her, loving she through the art. And it's not about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, take us to the dawn.
So I have a section in here in Act 2 called The Dawn, and it has some journal entries from that time, and I will share a piece from the very end. So when you guys read the book, for anyone listening who decides to take the journey, you'll get to go with me through the dawn and then end up where I arrived. This is called Dawn of Life. Can you ever wake up without falling asleep? One morning, it finally happened. The dawn of my life. The grandmother raised a torch in the sky called God, and let there be light on the long night of my dark garden heart, which blossomed ferociously, excited, shrieking into life, bewildered by what has always been right here in this miracle body with this miracle name, in this once shrouded Eden, forgotten with familiarity. Everything went full color. Everything was made new. The ancient skeleton stones jutting out of sand flesh. The imminent green bud opening for the first time now, which will die before sunset. And me, resurrected woman, failure at slow suicide. Thank God I have not yet died for all the times I tried and called it survival. I fell to my knees for it all. The vacuum toilets and their underground digestion. The global network of architect birds threading a sonar sky. The fallen neon flowers cast down from delighted branches, ushering my footsteps to my long-planned wedding with life. I began celebrating that I could cry, and I have not stopped. I will not stop this love affair with feeling. I will dance harder as I grieve and as I praise this almighty artist whose palette is so vast and vicious and unafraid to dare us to face a fraction of infinity by waking up with the eyes to see what we are a part of. I will climb higher and dance more and never ever be sorry for it again. I will participate in the dare to love what you feel. Raging love. Passionate life. There is a fire flower in my chest and I am lifting it up for you. Reaching for your dark garden heart that feeds on deadness. Screaming, live. Screaming, thank you. Screaming with nothing but a smile as you pass me. I refuse to turn back into myself and allow anyone to continue forgetting that I am able to wake up and baptize with this light of day. God help us. We never stop needing this light, though we may stop seeing it. I am a promise that there is more life to be born into before we close these eyes forever. You will be born dancing, weeping, and thanking everything that already is. My heart is a flower on fire. The dawn is coming for us all.
Ooh. Wow. Incredible. Wow. I mean, some of your poems just render me absolutely speechless. Like, damn, that's good.
Thank you.
That's really
A lot
good.
of my poems in here, they're not, they weren't shaped to be poems. There's not like a rhyme or a rhythm. There's not a lot of rules. I have some that follow that musicality, but this section in particular is a lot of just pure heart. It's pure channel of what I was feeling and seeing. And I feel it still.
Mm-hmm.
I remember still when I read it.
Yeah. It actually reminds me, and again, it's tough to follow up that poem, right? It's so fucking good. And I have a short poem.
I feel that way every time you share a poem, by the way.
I have a short poem that is at the end of my book, which is, a brief expression of this same just outrageous gratitude for life.
Yeah.
And this was for me a moment, similar, where I was just coming out of a medicine journey, and I was erupting with gratitude for life. And the poem's called It Is. I don't know what it is, but it is. It is. The outrageousness, horror, and beauty of hide and God seek. Dimensional density, thicker the better. Flowers and towers, blood and bones, mangoes and goals. What a gift. What a blessing. All of it. It is.
Oh, I love it. It's one of my favorite poems of the book.
Yeah.
I love it. And, oh gosh, well, I don't want to, you have some really, really, I think, juicy poems about for me, a lot of my book, towards the end of it, it becomes the celebration of the kind of hedonic, like a reclamation of the divine nature of what is the hedonic experience. Hedonic being, derived from Hedon as the goddess of pleasure. But it's like really a beautiful capacity that you have to bring, I think, the reader, the listener, into the flesh of like the divine carnality of the experience. And, some of your pieces, I don't know if you have any that are your favorites that you would love to share while we're in the conversation about that. But that was something for me with my book, where if I was going to reclaim myself and my story and all of the parts of me that I thought were maybe, things to be ashamed of or guilty about, or, things I regretted or whatever it might have been, there was also a rediscovery of life in all the parts of life that seemed like they were collectively exiled, that were, for me, I guess if I look at my book, it's taking us from the underworld to Eden. And really the cosmic giggle, the ridiculous part of the masterpiece is that it's all the same place. Mm-hmm. It's all the same place. And so I love that part, that part of your book where you bring in that piece and you really talk about like the full spectrum of it. It's like, oh my God, like what, how?
So wild.
How? And it's just really, really remarkable. And I think that that's one of the things I love most about, some of your pieces, is taking us into the kind of blood, sweat, and tears of the human experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I haven't shared, any of the, kind of hard moments, and I'll go in and I'll share, and there's a lot of like deeply erotic poems in here as well, but it doesn't seem like exactly the tone of where we are to go into the
part 2 or something.
Of the more the erotic, the late night edition
yes,
of our podcast. But I'm going to go into, because you're talking about, well, there's two. There's Hellenistic. I have Hedon appears twice. There's Hellenistic hedonism, and then there's hedonic aftermath. And maybe I'll read both of these, and because you invoked Hedon, and so there's 2 poems that I wrote about it, and so let's go and we'll go through both of these. The first one is erotic, and the second one is about when things don't go so well with the pursuit of Hedon, who is this ephemeral muse, and you have to dance with her in the right way. Hellenistic hedonism. Decadent salt crystals of pain in a caramel sea of pleasure, confectioner of nodding ropes and leather, whipping up the sea foam, Poseidon's blue-black stallion hoofprints of unbridled wild desires, impropriety sacrificed to Aphrodite in the garden beyond right and wrong. Dionysus was never so drunk with wine as when I devour you.
Yes, that's one of my favorites in the entire book. I might have been fishing for it a little bit. So delicious.
Thank you.
So delicious.
Because I have, in my palette for pleasure and eros is wide, and it can be, one of the lines of my poem is the whispers past, between pressed lips, where it's just breath in the maw of the goddess. I think I messed that up, but it's just like those moments of just like when you're kissing and actually your lips stop moving and all you're doing is just breathing each other's air, and it's just like that is like one flavor, and the other is wild, knotting ropes and leather, blue-black stallion hoofprints of your unbridled wild desires, and this whole spectrum. I've been blessed to have lovers, really since we were lovers that have like enjoyed exploring like the full gamut of the erotic experience. And I think for me, this book goes into all of that, and also the deep moments of jealousy. Like one poem that's the spiciest of them all is called "A Master's Jealousy," and I think you might have to buy the book to get that one out there. I don't even know. I don't even know if YouTube will let me actually put that one up. But I'm going to go on to the other side here, and this will probably be the last poem that I read from this. But we're going to be out on stages. We're going to be performing our shows together and on our own, and this is a part of our life, and this is us claiming our artistic side in a really potent way. I have a lot of projects, a lot of things, but poetry for me, since real young, was the way that I was expressing my art. And, I can't really sing that good. I can dance a little bit, but...
You're a hell of a poet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll say it.
Hedonic aftermath. My brain slurs and sputters, the dismal aftermath of apathetic fealty to hedonic fantasy. What happened to you? Or was it even you, anti-you, hijacking the self-love lacking, people-pleasing, peacock-stroking, hungry ghost, empty, pseudo-erotic simulation of kingly attention? It feels like rock bottom. But my autonomy has lost its virginity, a whore to my dealer's insidious degeneracy, as he pimps the angel of my divinity for some laughs and a good story. But really, it's a tragedy. God is bleeding, begging and beseeching me to rise in resplendence, declare my independence from any antecedent causality, so I am free to be whatever she needs me to be. I swear right now, so shall it be. And next time, I'll mean it.
Oh, gave me a little chill on the cheek. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's, and I think we've both been there.
Oh,
we've had these declarations like, no, I'm not fucking doing this again. Like I have so much more I have so much more to give. I have so much more I can be. And then we slide into something where we're like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
And then and I just recognized in this poem, as I was writing it, it was like, so shall it be. And then I realized how many times have I fucking said that. And so there was like that moment of honesty that I think hopefully people can feel is like, and next time I'll mean it. And one of these times we will. And I think every time we declare it, we mean it a little more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And we do it a little bit and then we forget. And then, and on it goes. Expanding. Yeah, I relate to that so much. A lot of, there's so many things that poetry has done for my path. It's helped me create and alchemize, what felt like very dark, kind of the inner demon, the inner vampire, into something beautiful, something of meaning. It also brought me victory. It's like actually the act of writing, the act of being honest, the act of standing and making a claim with my words calls forward, a little bit more of that possibility for those claims for me to hold myself accountable. It's like, here's the records, baby. Like, here's what you've, committed to. Here's what you've said never again. Recording the story is a really important way for me of, growing and really looking back and anchoring things in the subconscious that want attention and want response. They want the response of change. They want the response of, a new story instead of the autopilot of looping in the same old patterns. Yeah. And so that's been really big for me. And also, a lot of my book, I think the heartbeat of both of these books in a way is the honesty of them. The fact that you included that line. It's like you could have left off that line and it would have still been a fire poem, like a really, like a call to action kind of thing. But the last line just sets it off. It opens it because it's honest. It's like so honest. It's like you weren't living in the ideal of Aubrey. Yep. You were taking it to the ideal of Aubrey, but then you were bringing the poem into the truth of Aubrey. Yeah. Which is, I am human. I am fallible. I am, going to be in this dance for as long as I'm going to be in this dance. And I'm going to share that. And I think that, that's one of the gifts of both of our books, that there's a lot of real honesty in there. And humility, I mean, like one of the things that, one of the very short poems is, of course I'm an addict, because we have such an erotic palette and we experience all these wild medicines and sexual experiences and all of these things. And I think we both had our own battles that have shown up in different ways. And a very short poem of mine is, of course I'm an addict. The only thing that saves me is I'm more addicted to God than anything else. Short poem, but it's actually true. It's actually true. It's like if I wasn't actually the most addicted and committed to God, which is also the actualization of myself, the God that's in me, as me, through me, and beyond me, I'm done. Yep. I'm done. I know all of the chemicals and all of the things. And yes, they wear off. And yes, they have their, they don't work as well after you, and there's limits. But nonetheless, like what possibly can pull me out of any addiction other than God? And listening to RFK Jr. talk about it too. It's the same thing. And so many addicts who've had this pull, have been like, well, what gets you out? I mean, and oftentimes it's God. It's their faith in God. It's their desire to live in accord with their God and their potential. Yeah. And that's really the thing. And, I think we both had our battles. Oh yeah. And those battles are not, we're not like, George H.W. Bush sitting on a fucking
destroyer saying, "I declare victory," or whatever the hell he said. And then meanwhile, we were fighting for the next 20 fucking years. Like we're not saying that. We're saying like, all right, this is, we're in the battle.
Yeah. Here's what I learned in the last battle.
Yeah. We're in the battle. And also like, I know for myself, as long as my connection with God stays as the preeminent and most dominant force in my life, that I'll always be okay. I'll always make it through.
Yeah. I feel that so much. I mean, that was actually what saved me. It was really, really beholding the divine reality that I'm sitting in and apprehending it and beginning to turn myself towards it and be in relationship with it, which is a lot of what the poems evolve into. Is actually they're love poems within my relationship with God. And as long as I've touched that, I know it'll catch me, as much as I get lost, as much as I forget. And, I think there's that takes us into the field of true love. When I think about like the beginning of this conversation, which has gone so many different pathways, it's like, you've been you've been the most important relationship, I think, in my life in terms of, in every perfect way, you in the ways that we found each other and, had our adventures as beloveds, and then in the ways that we ended that relationship and went off on our respective adventures as individuals to go through all of the tests and trials and tribulations of life and the forgetting. And
through this process, you've been like best friends with every other partner that I've ever been with, which has been, wild, from like, Whitney and Stephanie and Vailana and Alana and everybody along the journey. You've been like there, not only loving me, but loving all of the people who in the old story, you would have been jealous of, and you would have been, but no.
I was at times, for sure. This is the honest poet era. I totally was. I totally was. But, and I wrote about the heartbreaks and the pains and the jealousy and, around our relationship and all the relationships that followed. And I think I've learned, I've gotten to compare paths. There's the path of running from love and running from pain, which is a big one. The only period of time we ever had some distance between us was me running from the pain of being close, while we reorganized our lives outside of being in union. But I have learned very clearly within my own body and my own self that, the difference between being in love and running from love is it's much, much more painful to run from love. And it might not be something, it might be like a way that is kind of like an anesthesia for a while. But whatever that love is that's there, that still hurts, that, to go all the way into it like a poet does, to write it, to feel it, to grieve it, to face it, and to burn through that and reclaim that into true love and the liberation of I love you. I love you as you are. I love you as you are. I love your happiness with anybody. I don't just love your happiness with me. I don't just love your happiness when your favor falls on me. I don't even just love you when you see me. I love you if you never see me. It's really been one of the greatest teachers of. It's been the greatest teacher of true love in my life to be able to step into that, and it's mutual. Yeah. You've never given up on me in all the moments when I was in the underworld, lost to myself. You never let me forget. You never stopped seeing me in truth, and you never stopped fighting for, the purpose of and the divinity that's been in my heart and soul this entire time. So it's such a it's such an amazing masterpiece moment to sit here and walk through this threshold of bringing our books to life and sharing this very vulnerable, very pure and intimate piece of both of us with the world. You know, we're each taking a part that nobody's ever seen before and saying, here, look deeply, closely, as long as you want at this part of me.
And, you know, hopefully in that process, I mean, you don't only see us, but you see yourself.
100%.
Yeah, and that's it. And maybe get a glimpse of the divine through our eyes so you can see God through your own eyes. So bring us home with something that shares your love for God. And it's kind of, you know, as I'm thinking and musing on things now, it's almost as if we never got married in Eros, but we got married in agape. You know, we share this love for the world and we share this love for God. And that's like, and also married in philia and these other different vectors, but you know, it's deep. And so
we have a sacred union of sorts over
here.
Indeed.
Indeed. So bring us to close this out. Take us to one final poem that that shares your love for God and love for life.
This piece is called God Flirts Back. Hey, you, with that heavy story of loneliness and longing. Stop replaying that recording. Tune in to the singing goosebumps on your heart. Trade your psychology for the art of relationships. Romance is not fool's gold. It is the nature of the sacred. There is no unrequited love in this world. God flirts back. Pay attention, and you might finally let yourself be given the bouquet that's waiting on your doorstep. Slow down your pacing. Somewhere in the quick halls of rat racing where everyone has bought in to pretend that they are invisible too. Look up. Notice something notice you. An electric on switch in the enchanted, glancing eyes of passersby. Get present with what's between your tensing thighs in that bed that you call empty. While the room may be dull red as waning embers, see through the shaded window. God is still holding a candle with a blue flame so hot, something in you will rise to a moan. Suddenly, you won't feel so alone. But God is so much more than a voyeur. And this passion that you harbor is not a secret fantasy. If you read between the lines of your favorite poetry, you will find God's hand writing just for you. That kind of love note that's too good to be true. But this is real life. Make you my wife outrageous courtship. Two-way worship. A monogamish, it's true. I love everyone. But I choose you, devotion. Spoken as ocean breath, diamond skyline gift box, spontaneous trip when you're least prepared, just to get lost in sweet strokes through your hair. Fight just to make up. No matter how rough, it's not going anywhere. You can trust this love. So don't take it for granted. Lay down your armor and surrender to the terrifying hope that those violet petals really are your crown from the divine. Rumi's wine is better, I swear. Get fucked up. Engage yourself with this Shakespearean drama. Unbutton your blouse. Let your tongue wag out. Say yes to the treasure buried in plain sight. You wouldn't be here if you weren't worth it. So pay attention to unearth it and keep on loving with all of your might. 'Cause God flirts back. Wow.
Flirts back.
Wow.
Whew.
Wow.
I was hoping you'd evoke Rumi there at the end. That's the way his love affair with the beloved has also been one of the deep inspirations in my life, and I know yours as well. Caitlyn, I love you. And I'm so proud and happy to be sharing, both of our books together through, our publishing company, Chakaruna. And so anybody who's listening, who wants to dive in, we got our books and we got different offerings. You can buy them together, buy them separate. Love to the Seventh Power, ridiculous masterpiece. We even may have some surprises and some secrets on there, potentially some gold notes that go along with our book. And there's all kinds of treasures that we're going to have offering. And we'll be talking about this a lot and potentially for the rest of our lives. And the poetry will continue on, but this captures so much of our journey in our life. And I couldn't think of any other way to do this but to do it with you.
It's the happy ending.
It's the happy ending.
And it's the beginning of the next chapter of the story.
Right. That's
I'm
right.
so honored and so grateful. Thank you for all the good material.
Yeah.
Thank you for believing in me.
Yeah.
Thank you
Always.
for our true love.
Always.
Here we go.
To the end.
To the end.
To the end. We love you guys.
Love you guys.
Take care. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.